Hi guys, thanks for joining me today. I'm Marilyn and my channel is Making with Marilyn. Now on my channel I do all things crafty, but on today's video I'm going to make a sublimation tumbler for my mother-in-law. I made her one on my channel about a year ago for Mother's Day last year. She loved it, so I want to make another one for her. So the things I'll be using in today's video are this image that I got off of Creative Fabrica. Now I got most of it off of Creative Fabrica, but I didn't really like what was here, so I put this over it. If you're interested in seeing how I did that, let me know. I'll do a short video on that. Now, in addition to my image, I have my sublimation tumbler. I always like to clean them with alcohol. I have some heat-resistant tape, a heat-resistant glove. I have a rotary cutter and a ruler so I can cut down my image. And then I just use this to rub onto the tumbler. Get the paper really tight. You'll see that here in just a little bit. This little picker tool to help get the tape off. Scissors for the same reason. And then for the first time, I'm going to use this little Pinch Perfect tool. Now, I've never used this before today, so I'm excited to see how that works. I have a heat-resistant glove, and then I also like to put a little bit of uncoated butcher paper around my tumblers when I put them in the press. Now I'm going to use an auto press that I recently received from Real Cant, but you could do this in your sublimation oven if that's what you prefer. You could use a manual press. I'm just going to use that automatic one today. Before I get started, the first thing I want to do is go ahead and clean my tumbler. That way it can be drying while I'm cutting down the image. So I just spray a little bit of alcohol on a paper towel, and this is 90% alcohol. That's what I prefer to use. And then I'm just cleaning this off in case there's any grease or grime or anything on it. Now, a lot of people skip this step. If that works for you, that's great. To me, it's just fast and easy, so I go ahead and do it. Now we'll set that aside and let it dry, and then I want to make sure that there's no alcohol on my cutting mat, because this next step is to cut my image down. Now when I'm doing this, I like to use a ruler that has cork on the back. So I just line it up, and then on at least one end of my tumbler, I want to cut all this white off, and even a tiny bit of the design. Now if you look at this piece of paper, you can tell that I cut ever so slightly a little bit of the design off. That's exactly what I want. If you have any white down against this tumbler, then you're going to get a white streak on it. So I want to make sure that there's no white there. Now on the other end, if you want to leave just a slight white streak, you can, but I typically cut all the white off of this end too. All right, now before I take the time to cut the top and the bottom, let's make sure it's still wide enough. Let's make sure it goes all the way around my tumbler. And it does. Now you might wonder, what size did I cut that at? I cut this piece out with my Cricut. It's 9.4 inches wide and 8.2 inches tall. It's really oversized for what I need, but when I cut a little of the image off on each end, the 9.4 is perfect because it cuts it down to the way I like it. Now 8.2 is a little bit tall, and in fact I printed this design just a little taller than that because I didn't like how much wood was showing down here. There's so much more wood down here than there is up here. So I made it taller without wider so that I could cut a little bit of that off. But I typically start with 9.4 by 8.2. Now different tumblers are shaped slightly different. I've seen some of my tumblers that are a little taller and narrower versus some that are slightly shorter, a little wider. So you have to know what tumblers you're working with. Now just like on the sides, I like to cut a tiny bit of the design off up here so that I know I have ink going all the way to the top of my tumbler. And then for this last part, I'm going to go ahead and turn my tumbler upside down. have my image upside down, and then I can see visually about how much I need to cut off. Now I'm going to be conservative because I can always cut more off, but you can't add it back on. So to cut this, I have it straight along my cutting mat. And then I have my ruler lined up as well. Now it looks like I'm cutting a lot off. And remember I said I printed it extra tall because I wanted to cut some of that off. All right, so here's how much you can see under the bottom of my tumbler. So right now it would curve around probably a little bit more than I want it to. So I'm going to line the ruler up with this edge and take just a tiny bit more off. Now I don't want it to wrap too far around the bottom because that's where you can have those white streaks because your paper is puckering. It's going too far around, you're pulling it tight, and then it puckers. And I know that from experience. It's even with the top, and it's just barely enough to wrap around. Okay, it's not going to matter which side I have against the tumbler because remember I cut off a little of the design on both ends. All right, so let's go ahead and get my tape over here where I need it. Again, let's see, I'm going to have this upside down. Make sure my print is the right way. And then I'm going to go ahead and wrap this around fairly tightly. Now with this Pinch Perfect, it acts kind of like just a spare hand because you're not having to pull from this side and this side. The tool's doing the work for you. So I want to go ahead and close this up so that the seam is showing. Now I don't have it pulled super tight yet, but now I'm going to go ahead and pull on that so that that paper is really, really tight. I almost wish I had a second one to go over here, or that you could double it up somehow. Like if there were two of these and then you could tape in between them. But this will work perfectly fine, I'm sure. I've had people tell me these work really well. And so I just want to try it out myself today. All right, I've got my tape bunched up. Okay, the top's even, the bottom's off a little bit. That's probably because I didn't cut it perfectly straight, but that's okay. All right, so I want to make sure that I put my tape down on the side of the paper that is on top. And then I'm going to squeeze this Pinch Perfect and wrap that over really tight. Okay, since I know that's tight, let's just go ahead and move down this way just a little bit. Pull that tight. And then I'm going to just keep going down the tumbler like that. Now, if you've watched my videos, you know I always like to have tape all the way down. And so that's what I'm going to do. If that's too much tape for you, then do it the way that works for you. I often have people tell me that I don't need all the tape that I use, but I'll tell you, my tumblers have really improved since I've used more tape. Okay, so my paper is off just a little bit there. I'm just going to take these scissors. It's a little bit short. No, I don't think that's too short there. So let's go ahead and take the scissors and just slightly trim that up so it meets up there. All right, so I want to make sure that I have the paper all the way to the top. And then if I feel like it's not quite far enough to the top, I put my hand in and I just kind of push on the paper so it'll come up just a little bit. I actually feel like this is okay. So let me show you my next step. Again, yes, I use a lot of tape. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on the top piece of paper, and I'm pulling it really, really tightly because I want it to stretch just a little bit so I get that rebound effect. I can reuse that. Now, I want to just push my paper straight over the tumbler. I don't like to push around like this because I feel like you can pull on your paper. I want to go straight over the tumbler. Okay, we'll come down here. I'll go ahead and tape that last little bit there. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here as far as taping goes. And then if I see any puckering toward the bottom, I want to go ahead and smooth that out just as much as I can. So I can use my nail. I can use a tool like this. But those puckers are what cause the little white streaks on the bottom and the top of your tumbler. Now for me, when they show up, it's usually at the bottom because I put the paper even with the top. But I've had them both places. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and take this and rub all the way around. I feel like this is so much better than just using my fingers. So I do it at the bottom. I don't think I already did it at the top. Usually I do. And then I especially want to make sure that I do it here at the seam. So I get on the bottom piece of paper right up against the tape first. And then I want to press down on that top piece just to really burnish that down onto the tumbler. So that's how I tape. And again, maybe it's too much tape for you. If you don't need that much tape, don't use that much tape. Now I have a video where I unbox this, so if you want a lot of details about it, watch that. But today I'm just going to give you the basics. So you turn it on, there's a little toggle switch here, you just push that. And then this machine has 4 what they call gears. To me, it's just 4 presets. And preset number 1, and you see a 1 right there, that is for skinny sublimation tumblers, 20-ounce skinny sublimation tumblers, as well as a couple of other things. So it's heating up rather quickly, you can see that. Now preset number 1, or they call it gear number 1, it heats up to a temperature of 356 degrees and it presses for 45 seconds. Now once it opens, I'll turn the tumbler and I'll press it again for another 45 seconds. And then it has a pressure of 60. That's just their preset. And so if I find that these don't work well for me, maybe I want it hotter or more pressure, you can change these presets. But in my first video where I used this, I used their presets and the tumbler came out beautiful. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with those. Now they do tell you, like a lot of tumbler presses, to have an empty tumbler or a blank tumbler inside while it's heating up. I'm going to go ahead and follow those instructions and have that one there. Okay, this is almost up to temperature, so I'm going to go ahead and take that tumbler out. And then I'm going to go ahead and wrap my tumbler in some butcher paper. I'm not so much going to wrap it. I'm going to use the butcher paper as a cradle. Now that protects the pressing pad. See how it's white right now? If your sublimation ink would bleed through the back of your paper, which I have not found it to do that with this HTV romp paper, but some papers do, and if it did, it could get on that pressing pad. Then eventually that could transfer back to something you're trying to press. So their instructions have you start with the seam up. I want to go ahead and center this just as much as possible, and then I'll press start right here. You can press start here or enter here. Now let's say something happened and you realized that something wasn't right. Maybe you forgot to put your butcher paper in or something. You can stop it by hitting this button right there. I don't want to do it because I don't want it to open up, but it's kind of an emergency stop if you want to open it up real quickly. All right, so I'm supposed to rotate this 180 degrees. And I think that is pretty close. So this time I'll hit the enter button. Now, I'm going to go ahead and stop it because I see I'm not anywhere close to being centered, and I want it to be more centered. Okay, so I have to unrelease that or release that, then press enter. Once you push the stop button, it stays depressed until you press it again. Now this is close to opening, so I'm just going to move it over. That way I can put my tumbler on this mat just till it cools off a little bit and I get this press out of the way. All right, I'm excited to see what this looks like, and I typically don't let them cool off. Some people do. I'm typically in a rush, so I go ahead and peel it off. So I'm just going to pull a little of this tape out. It's too hot to really touch for very long, and the reason I had my scissors is so I could just snip on that tape, and then it'll rip really easily. Now, I don't want to take all the tape off because I want to get a good peek at it. So I'm going to go right here with this weeding tool. Now, I'm not going to push very hard. I don't want to accidentally scratch my tumbler. I'm just going to get under this tape and pull up. Then also, while this tumbler is still really hot, I don't want to shift my paper because I don't want to have any ghosting or blurriness. All right, let me peek, see if it looks like it's processed fully. That looks good. The seam looks good. So let's go ahead and look at the bottom. When I have issues with my tumblers, it is typically at the bottom. I've gotten a lot better over time, but for some reason, well, it's because when I'm not super careful on my placement and my taping, sometimes I get little puckers down there and they show up ever so slightly on the bottom. All right, by this time, the tumbler isn't super hot. I can touch it and handle it without it burning. Look at those colors. Okay, let me show you what I was talking about. See my little puckers right there? There's some little white streaks right there. That's because of how I wrapped it and taped it. I probably should have had my paper just a little bit shorter at the bottom. When you do that, a little bit more your bottom shows, but you don't get those little pucker marks. I'm not unhappy with this though. That's gorgeous. Super pretty. Now it looks a little light there. I'm sure that's in the design. I love it. Look at the seam. That looks good. It is a beautiful tumbler. My mother-in-law's favorite flowers are sunflowers, and her favorite color is yellow. One of my favorite things is animal print, and so I'm sure she will love this and cherish this, and I'll be her favorite daughter-in-law. Well, I just happen to be her only daughter-in-law. So thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you learned something or at least enjoyed watching. If you did, please give me that thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. If you do, tap the bell and then select the all notification. That way YouTube lets you know anytime I upload new content. Thanks again, and until my next video, bye-bye.